Omega walks beside the Alpha King through cursed woods, yet a vanished kingdom calls only to them. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main characters. In the depths of a cursed forest, where the trees seemed to whisper and the air was thick with secrets, Sophia Blackwood walked side by side with the mysterious Alpha King, Eric Nightshade. The moonlight barely filtered through the dense canopy above, casting eerie shadows across the path ahead. Despite the haunting silence of the woods, Sophia felt an odd sense of calm beside Eric. He was unlike any alpha she had ever encountered. Tall, powerful, with a presence that could command any room, yet there was a quiet sorrow in his eyes, a burden she could not yet understand. Sophia, the rejected Omega, had lived her life in the shadows of others, never seen, never chosen. She had been cast aside by her pack, left to wander alone in a world that valued strength and dominance above all else. But here, beside the Alpha King, she felt something stirred deep within her, something she had long buried, hope. Eric, though silent, seemed to sense her unease. His stride was steady, unbothered by the darkness around them, as though he was accustomed to walking through nightmares. She, on the other hand, could not shake the feeling that the forest itself was watching them, waiting for something. The further they traveled, the colder it became. Sophia's breath misted in the chilly air, but Eric remained unfazed, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. Despite the harsh conditions, his presence was comforting. "Are we far from the kingdom?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had heard stories of Eric's kingdom, a place that once stood tall and proud, only to vanish from the map after a dark curse was placed upon it. But now, as they ventured deeper into the cursed woods, it felt as though the kingdom was not just a memory. It was calling to them, urging them to discover its secrets. Eric's response was a simple nod, though his eyes darkened at the mention of the kingdom. It was clear he was carrying the weight of its destruction, and yet, there was something in his gaze, an undeniable determination. Sophia didn't understand why he had brought her here, why he trusted her with this mission. Was she just another pawn in his quest for redemption, or was there something more to their connection? As they moved deeper into the forest, the air grew heavy with tension. The once silent trees seemed to stir, the branches creaking as if whispering forgotten tales of the kingdom that had fallen. Eric's grip on the hilt of his sword tightened, as though he was preparing for something. But Sophia could not shake the feeling that whatever awaited them in this forsaken place was more than just a battle, it was a reckoning. The kingdom was waiting, and so was their destiny. "I am not sure how much longer we have," Sophia said, her voice shaking slightly as she looked around the forest. It felt as if the trees themselves were closing in on them, their twisted branches reaching out like dark fingers. The cursed woods were known to be unwelcoming to all, and the further they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Eric remained silent, his presence a steady anchor beside her. He had not spoken much since they had entered the forest, and Sophia was beginning to wonder if he was lost in his thoughts, or if he was simply keeping his secrets to himself. The Alpha King's face remained unreadable, his eyes scanning the path ahead with the precision of someone who had faced more dangers than most could imagine. Despite the weight of the silence between them, Sophia felt an undeniable connection to him. It was strange, she had never felt this close to anyone before. Perhaps it was the shared solitude, the strange bond between them that seemed to grow stronger the further they ventured into the woods. The wind howled through the branches, carrying with it the scent of earth and something else, something ancient. Sophia could not place it, but it tugged at the edges of her senses. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, "if we're being led somewhere, or if we're just wandering aimlessly?" Eric's gaze flicked to her for a moment, his expression softening ever so slightly. "I don't believe in chance," he said, his voice low, yet filled with quiet certainty. "Nothing here is random. This forest, this land, it has a purpose. And so do we." His words sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. She had heard of the cursed woods, but no one had ever dared to speak of them with such conviction. She looked up at him, her curiosity piqued. And what is that purpose? She asked, feeling as though she had stumbled upon something she was not meant to understand. Eric hesitated for a brief moment, his jaw tightening as though he were struggling to find the right words. The kingdom that lies beyond this forest, he began, is not just a kingdom of men. It is the last vestige of an ancient power. A power that once shaped the world, but was lost to time. And now, it calls to us, to me. Sophia's mind raced as she tried to grasp the full weight of his words. The Lost Kingdom. She had heard whispers of it, but had always dismissed it as legend. Could it really be real? And if so, what did it have to do with her? And what does it want from us? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric's gaze turned hard, like a man staring into the abyss. It does not want anything. It demands everything. The words hung in the air, thick with the promise of something monumental. The trees around them seemed to lean closer, as though they, too, were listening intently to the conversation. The sound of the forest grew quieter, and for a moment, Sophia could hear nothing but the beating of her own heart. We are not just walking through these woods, Eric continued, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. We are walking toward our destiny. And whether we are ready or not, it will find us. The weight of his words settled over Sophia like a heavy blanket. Her heart raced, and she could feel the pull of something deep within her, something that urged her to keep going. The Alpha King's presence, the cursed woods, and the vanished kingdom, it all felt so surreal, yet undeniable. As they continued walking, the trees seemed to part just a little more, revealing a faint glow in the distance. The kingdom, perhaps, or something that led to it. Sophia's mind raced with questions, but there was no time for answers now. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And for the first time in her life, Sophia felt that she was no longer alone. She was a part of something far greater than herself. I feel it, Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. The air, it's different now. The dense trees that surrounded them seemed to grow taller as they continued their journey, their twisted roots and limbs pressing in on them from all sides. The faint glow in the distance had grown stronger, and she could see now that it wasn't just the moonlight breaking through the trees, it was something else. Something alive, pulsing with energy. Eric's steps were steady, his presence a constant beside her. Yet, as they ventured deeper into the forest, Sophia noticed something strange. The once cold air had shifted, becoming warmer, as though the land itself was responding to their presence. It is the forest, Eric said, his voice steady, though there was an edge of something unspoken in his tone. It knows we are here. It has been waiting for us. The weight of his words hung in the air, and for the first time since they had entered the cursed woods, Sophia felt the true magnitude of their journey. She could feel the ancient magic in the air, thick and tangible, pulling them forward with an irresistible force. As they approached the source of the light, the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift, the path growing uneven, as if the earth itself was trying to reveal something hidden. Sophia's heart raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. She had heard tales of ancient forests, of places where time itself seemed to bend and twist, but she had never believed they were real. And yet, here she was, standing in the heart of one. What is this place? She asked, her curiosity overcoming her fear. Eric's gaze turned to her, his expression unreadable. It is the last of the old world, he said quietly. A kingdom that was lost long ago, swallowed by time and magic. It was here that the fate of our people was sealed. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She had heard of the vanished kingdom. But the stories had always seemed like fairy tales, something whispered around campfires to frighten children. To think that she was standing at the threshold of such a place, where history and legend converged, was almost too much to comprehend. As they reached the edge of a small clearing, the source of the light became clear. It was a stone archway, weathered by centuries but still standing strong, its intricate carvings glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. There was something undeniably powerful about the archway, as if it were the doorway to another realm, another time. This is it, Eric said, his voice low and reverent. The gateway to the kingdom. The place where everything begins and ends. Sophia stepped forward, her instincts urging her to reach out, to touch the archway, but she hesitated. Something about it felt dangerous, as if it could swallow her whole if she wasn't careful. "Are you ready?" Eric's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to find him looking at her, his expression unreadable once again. He had been the leader, the Alpha King, for so long that it was hard to imagine him uncertain or vulnerable. But there was something different about him now. He wasn't just the powerful Alpha, he was a man on the edge of something greater than himself, something that could change everything. "I don't know," Sophia admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I have to try." Eric gave a single nod. "Then we face it together." And with that, they crossed the threshold into the kingdom's forgotten heart, where the past and future would collide, and where their destinies would be shaped by forces beyond their control. The moment they stepped through the archway, the air shifted around them. The light, which had seemed faint and distant moments before, now surged forward, enveloping them in a soft, golden glow. Sophia blinked, adjusting her eyes to the sudden brightness, and found herself standing in a vast open space, unlike anything she had ever seen. Towering trees with silver leaves stretched toward the sky, their trunks twisted and ancient, as though they had been here for centuries. The ground beneath them was soft, covered in a carpet of moss that seemed to hum with energy. It felt as though the very earth was alive, aware of their presence. Eric's hand brushed against Sophia's arm as he moved forward, his steps silent and purposeful. "This is where it all began," he murmured, his voice filled with awe and something deeper, regret, perhaps. The kingdom, long forgotten by the world, lay before them, hidden beneath layers of time and magic. "The kingdom of my ancestors," Eric continued, his gaze distant, as though he could see beyond the present into a time long past. "A place of power, of beauty, and of great loss." Sophia's heart raced as she took in the scene before her. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her, the burden of a kingdom lost to time. She turned to Eric, her curiosity growing. "What happened here?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with the question she had been too afraid to ask until now. Eric paused, his eyes flashing with an emotion Sophia could not quite name. "The curse," he said simply, his voice hardening. "A curse that tore this kingdom apart. The very magic that once bound it together turned against us, destroying everything we held dear." Sophia felt a pang of sympathy for the man beside her. She had heard the rumors of Eric's past, of the fall of his kingdom, but to see it with her own eyes, to stand on the land that had once been home to so many, was something else entirely. She couldn't imagine the weight he must carry. "But we're here now," Sophia said, her voice steady, though she could feel the uncertainty creeping into her words. "We're standing in the heart of the kingdom. What does this mean for us?" Eric's gaze shifted to her, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something vulnerable in his eyes. "It means we are at the crossroads," he replied, his voice quiet but filled with resolve. "The past and the future collide here. This is where the curse can be undone, or where it can consume everything once more." Sophia felt the gravity of his words settle over her like a heavy cloak. This wasn't just about a lost kingdom, it was about something far greater, something that could affect the fate of the world. She could feel the magic in the air, thick and pulsing with potential, and for the first time, she understood just how much was at stake. As they continued to move through the forgotten kingdom, the landscape shifted. The trees grew taller and more majestic, their branches twisting into the sky, forming natural arches that seemed to guide their path. The ground beneath them was soft and spongy, almost as if the very earth was breathing with them. The sense of power, of something ancient and untapped, was overwhelming. Sophia could feel the magic vibrating in the air around her, and it was as if the kingdom itself was waking up, responding to their presence. "Do you feel it?" Sophia asked, her voice breathless. Eric nodded, his gaze scanning the surroundings. "This is the heart of the magic," he said, his voice low. "It's here that the kingdom's power resides. It's also here that the curse was born." Sophia's heart raced. They were standing on the edge of something monumental, something that could change everything. As they continued deeper into the heart of the kingdom, she felt the pull of the magic growing stronger, calling them forward. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Eric turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Now," he said softly, "we unlock the truth." The deeper they ventured into the heart of the kingdom, the more palpable the magic became. The air hummed with a quiet power, almost like the forest itself was breathing. Sophia could feel it pulling her, urging her forward, as though the kingdom had been waiting for her arrival for centuries. The path they followed seemed to shift with each step, the trees bending in ways that defied nature, creating passages that led them deeper into the forgotten land. Eric's presence beside her was steady, a calm anchor in the midst of the storm of magic surrounding them. His eyes, always distant and unreadable, now held a flicker of something more, something that Sophia could not quite place. "Do you feel it?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as the ground beneath them seemed to pulse with the same energy that vibrated in the air. Eric's gaze shifted to her, his expression softened ever so slightly. "Yes," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "This is the heart of it all. The kingdom, the curse, and everything that has come after it. It is all tied together here." Sophia looked around, taking in the eerie beauty of the kingdom. The towering trees seemed to stretch endlessly, their branches interwoven like the threads of a forgotten tapestry. The stone ruins they past were worn with age, yet they still held an undeniable majesty, their crumbling walls telling stories of a time long past. As they moved further, the air grew thick with the scent of earth and ancient magic. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying with it a faint melody like the kingdom itself was singing a song of remembrance. "What happened here?" Sophia asked again, the question weighing heavily on her heart. "What caused the curse?" Eric's face darkened, and for a moment, he seemed lost in thought. The weight of the past hung heavily on him, and Sophia could sense the burden he carried. "It was power," he said, his voice low and filled with regret. "Too much power, and too little wisdom. My ancestors sought to control magic, to harness it for their own gain. But the magic of this land is not something that can be controlled. It is a force of nature, wild and untamed. When they tried to bind it, they set in motion a chain of events that would destroy everything." Sophia felt a chill creep up her spine as she listened to Eric's words. The kingdom, once a place of beauty and prosperity, had fallen because of greed and the desire for power. It was a warning, a reminder that some forces were not meant to be controlled. "And now," she asked softly, her heart heavy with the weight of their journey. "Now, we have a choice," Eric replied, his voice resolute. "We can either break the curse, or we can let it consume us. The magic here is still alive, but it is fractured. We must restore balance, or risk everything being lost forever." As they walked deeper into the heart of the kingdom, the air grew thick with anticipation. Sophia could feel the pull of the magic, a force that seemed to be calling to her. It was as though the kingdom itself recognized her presence, as if she were the key to its salvation or its final destruction. They arrived at a clearing, the largest one they had encountered so far. In the center stood a massive stone altar, its surface covered in intricate runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air around it buzzed with energy, the magic so strong that it almost hurt to be near it. Eric stopped in front of the altar, his expression solemn. "This is where it all began," he said quietly. "This is where the curse was born. And this is where it must end." Sophia stepped forward, her heart racing. The altar seemed to beckon her, the runes pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the stone, and immediately, a surge of energy coursed through her. The air crackled with power, and for a moment, she felt as though the very essence of the kingdom was flowing through her veins. "It's time," Eric said, his voice steady as he stepped beside her. "Are you ready?" Sophia took a deep breath, her mind racing with the weight of what lay ahead. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew that there was no turning back now. She nodded, her hand tightening around the stone as she focused on the runes. A bright light enveloped them both, and the world around them seemed to fade away. In that moment, Sophia felt the full force of the kingdom's magic, its power, its history, and its pain. And in that moment, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready to face it, because this was not just Eric's fight, or the kingdom's fight. It was hers as well. As the light enveloped them, Sophia's heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She could feel the magic surging through her, its power intense and overwhelming. The runes on the altar pulsed with an ancient energy, and for a moment, it felt as though the entire kingdom was alive, watching them. The air around her crackled, thick with anticipation. Eric stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor, but even he seemed affected by the raw magic coursing through the air. He didn't speak, but Sophia could feel his gaze on her, steady and unwavering. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes as she allowed the energy to wash over her. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was as though the very essence of the kingdom, its history, its people, its magic, was flowing into her. She felt it all, the joy, the sorrow, the triumph, the loss. It was as if she were connected to the past, present, and future all at once. "It's calling to me," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the magic. Eric's hand rested gently on her shoulder, grounding her. "It is calling to both of us," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "The magic here is ancient, and it chooses who it will trust. We must be strong, Sophia. The kingdom is alive, and it will test us." She nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt so connected to anything in her life, yet at the same time, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. This was no longer just about Eric's lost kingdom or the curse that had befallen it. This was about something much greater, about the fate of everything, about her place in this ancient, unfolding story. The light around them intensified, the runes on the altar glowing brighter, casting strange shadows on the ground. Sophia reached out, her hand hovering just above the stone, and she felt a sudden pulse of power, a deep, resonating hum that seemed to come from the very heart of the kingdom. It was as if the kingdom itself had recognized her presence, as if it had been waiting for her. "Do it," Eric urged, his voice a low murmur. "The time is now." Sophia nodded again, her fingers brushing the surface of the stone. The moment her skin made contact with the cold surface, the magic exploded. The ground beneath them trembled, and the air was filled with a deafening sound, like the roar of 1,000 voices. The light from the altar flared, blinding them both. For a moment, there was nothing but the overwhelming sensation of power, of magic, of life itself. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The air grew still. The light faded. The kingdom, the magic, everything returned to silence. Sophia stood there, breathing heavily, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked around, her gaze falling on Eric, who seemed equally stunned by the force of the magic. But there was something in his eyes now, a glimmer of hope that hadn't been there before. "Did we do it?" Sophia asked, her voice shaking. Eric didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around, his gaze sweeping over the clearing. The trees, the ruins, the altar, all of it seemed to have changed. The air was still thick with magic, but it was no longer oppressive. It was lighter, almost like the kingdom itself was breathing again. "I think we have," Eric said softly, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "The curse is broken." Sophia's heart leaped in her chest. She had done it. They had done it. They had broken the curse that had plagued the kingdom for so long. But even as the relief washed over her, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than they had yet uncovered. What would happen now? What would become of the kingdom, of Eric, and of her? "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric turned to her, his expression serious but filled with determination. "Now, we rebuild," he said quietly. "We restore what was lost." Sophia nodded, a sense of purpose filling her chest. She had come here to help break a curse, but now, she realized, her journey was just beginning. Together, she and Eric would rebuild this lost kingdom, and with it, a future filled with possibility. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the ancient trees, a sense of calm settled over the once cursed kingdom. The air, still thick with magic, now felt more alive, as though the very land had been reborn. Sophia stood in the center of the clearing, her heart still racing from the intensity of the ritual. She turned to Eric, who stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His posture, once tense and burdened, now seemed lighter, as though the weight of the curse had been lifted not just from the kingdom, but from his very soul. "It's over," Sophia whispered, more to herself than to him. Eric nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "Yes, but it's only the beginning. The curse is broken, but there is still much work to be done. The kingdom must be rebuilt, and so must we." Sophia felt a strange sense of both relief and anticipation. She had come here to help Eric break a curse, but now she realized that her journey was far from over. The kingdom had been restored, but what would they do with it? What kind of future would they build from the ashes of the past? Where do we start? She asked, her voice steady, though her mind was still racing. Eric gave her a small smile, his expression softening. We start with the people. The ones who survived, the ones who remember what this place once was. They will be the foundation of what comes next. He turned to face her fully, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. I may be the Alpha King, but I cannot do this alone. We need to unite the people, gather those who have been scattered by the curse. Only then can we rebuild. Sophia nodded, her mind already working through the possibilities. There was so much to do, so many decisions to make, but for the first time, she felt as though she had a place in this world, a purpose that went beyond simply surviving. And what about you? She asked. What will you do, now that the kingdom is free? Eric's gaze turned distant for a moment, as though he was seeing something far beyond the clearing, beyond the kingdom itself. I will lead, he said, his voice low but filled with an unwavering strength. I will help my people rebuild, restore what was lost, and ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. He turned back to her, his eyes meeting hers once more. But I can't do it without you, Sophia. The sincerity in his voice took her by surprise. She had expected him to say something about duty, about power, but this felt different. This was about something deeper, something that went beyond their roles as Alpha and Omega. She took a deep breath, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions, hope, fear, and something else she couldn't quite name. You won't have to, she replied, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet certainty. We'll do it together. Eric's eyes softened, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Together, he repeated, as though the word itself held the weight of their shared destiny. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the past and the promise of the future hanging in the air between them. It was a new beginning, not just for the kingdom, but for them both. The magic in the air had settled, but there was still a sense of movement, of something stirring deep within the land. It was as though the kingdom itself was awakening, ready to start anew. As they turned and began walking back toward the heart of the kingdom, Sophia could feel the change in the air, the sense that anything was possible. They had broken the curse, but now they would build something even greater from the ruins. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles, but for the first time, Sophia felt ready to face it. She was no longer just an Omega. She was part of something much bigger, something that had the power to change the world. And with Eric by her side, she knew they would face whatever came next together. As Eric and Sophia walked through the heart of the kingdom, they felt a sense of quiet anticipation. The air, once heavy with the remnants of the curse, now felt lighter, as though the land itself was taking a deep breath after centuries of suffering. The trees, with their silver leaves shimmering in the morning light, seemed to stand taller, more vibrant. The ruins that had once whispered of destruction now whispered of rebirth. Do you feel it? Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric looked at her, his expression thoughtful. Yes, he said, his tone soft but filled with an intensity that matched the pulse of the land. The magic here is still strong, but it's different now. It's not the oppressive force it once was. It's like the kingdom is waking up, ready to start anew. Sophia nodded, her heart swelling with hope. She had always felt like an outsider, an Omega who was never meant to fit in with the world around her. But now, in this place, she felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. The kingdom, the magic, Eric, everything felt connected, as though they were all part of a greater story that had only just begun. As they moved further into the heart of the kingdom, they came across a group of people gathered in a clearing. At first, Sophia thought they were simply travelers passing through, but as they got closer, she realized they were survivors, people who had once called this kingdom home. Some looked older, their faces weathered by time, while others were younger, children who had never known the kingdom in its prime. They were all looking at Eric with a mixture of reverence and curiosity, as if they, too, were wondering what the future held. Eric stopped, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. For a moment, there was silence. The weight of what had been lost, and what had been found, hung in the air. Then, a man stepped forward, his face lined with age but his eyes sharp and clear. "You have returned," the man said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We thought the kingdom was lost forever." Eric's expression softened, a flicker of emotion crossing his face. "It was," he replied. "But it is not lost anymore. The curse has been broken, and it is time for us to rebuild." The crowd stirred, a murmur of hope spreading through them. Sophia could feel the energy in the air shift, as if the very earth beneath their feet was responding to Eric's words. These people, the survivors of the fallen kingdom, were finally seeing the light of a new dawn. "We will need all of you," Eric continued, his voice steady and commanding. "To restore the kingdom, we must work together. This is not just my kingdom, it is yours as well. We rebuild not just the walls and the streets, but the heart of the kingdom. We rebuild our future." The man who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and awe. "We will follow you, my king," he said. "We will help you rebuild. For the kingdom, for the future." Eric nodded, his gaze shifting to Sophia, who stood quietly by his side. "Together," he said softly, his words meant for her as much as for the people gathered before them. As the crowd began to disperse, Eric and Sophia stood in the clearing, the weight of the moment settling around them. "This is just the beginning," Eric said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "We have much work to do, but we will do it together. We will restore what was lost, and we will make this kingdom stronger than it ever was." Sophia felt a sense of purpose fill her chest, and for the first time in her life, she knew exactly where she belonged. She was no longer just an outsider, no longer just an Omega. She was a part of something much bigger, something that would shape the future of this kingdom and beyond. And with Eric by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The kingdom had been broken, but now it was time for it to rise again, stronger and more united than ever before. As the days passed, the kingdom began to stir with life once more. The people, once scattered and broken, came together under Eric's leadership, united by the shared goal of rebuilding what had been lost. Sophia stood by his side, her heart swelling with pride as she watched the kingdom slowly come back to life. The first steps were small, rebuilding homes, restoring the fields, clearing the remnants of the curse that had once plagued the land, but with each passing day, the people grew more hopeful, more determined. Eric's presence was a constant, a reminder of what they had fought for, of what they had lost, and of what they had now gained. He moved through the kingdom with quiet confidence, his gaze steady and unyielding. But every so often, Sophia would catch a glimpse of something softer in his eyes, something that told her the burden of leadership was not as easy to bear as it appeared. One evening, as the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting the kingdom in a warm, golden light, Sophia found herself standing on the balcony of the palace, watching the people work below. The kingdom was still in the early stages of restoration, but already, it felt different. It felt like home. A voice behind her broke the silence, and she turned to find Eric standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable as always. "It's coming together," he said quietly, his gaze following hers to the bustling scene below. "Yes," Sophia agreed, her voice filled with a quiet sense of fulfillment. "It's hard to believe how far we've come in such a short time." Eric stepped closer, standing beside her as they both watched the people of the kingdom at work. "We've only just begun," he replied. "There is still much to be done. But I know that with them by my side, by our side, we can make this kingdom greater than it ever was." Sophia glanced at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of admiration and something deeper. She had seen the strength in Eric, the determination to restore his kingdom, but it was moments like this, when he allowed himself to show a glimpse of vulnerability, that made her see the man behind the crown. "You're not alone, you know," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the breeze. "You never have been." Eric turned to her, his gaze softening for a moment. "I know," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of all the unsaid things between them. "But it doesn't make it any easier." Sophia smiled, reaching out to place a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but filled with a sense of connection. "You don't have to carry it all alone. Not anymore." Eric met her gaze, his eyes searching hers for a moment before he nodded. "I know," he said again, his voice tinged with something like gratitude. They stood there in silence, watching the kingdom they had both fought to save, knowing that there was still much to do, but that they would face it together. As the night settled over the kingdom, the stars shining bright above, Sophia felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She was no longer the broken Omega who had been cast aside. She was a part of something greater now, something that would continue to grow and thrive. And with Eric by her side, she knew that they could face whatever challenges the future held. Together, they would rebuild not just the kingdom, but a future for their people, a future filled with hope, unity, and the promise of a better tomorrow.